Hey everyone, you are listening to Verdon Interviews, episode number 3, with your host, Ken Verdon. For today's guest, we have clinical psychologist and neuroscientist Helen Weng of the University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Weng has a BA in Neuroscience and Behavior from Columbia University, as well as a PhD in Clinical Psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is currently an assistant professor of psychiatry at UCSF and a core member of the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine. She is also an affiliate faculty member at the Neuroscape Center at the UCSF Sandler Neurosciences Center. Dr. Weng spends a great deal of her time researching and studying the neurobiological mechanisms through which meditation training may improve social behavior and mental health. Some of this research prior to UCSF was conducted at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she worked at the Center for Healthy Minds and Weizmann Laboratory for Brain Imaging and Behavior. Dr. Weng and I will be discussing these topics of meditation and compassionate thinking and how they may be observed from objective perspectives and measured. We will also be talking about some of the current hypotheses and theories of how meditation may be beneficial to us and other personal opinions we both have on the matter. I hope that by the end of this discussion, you will have more of a realized understanding of how we can truly learn to begin our own pursuit to compassion. And with that, let's begin the conversation. Hello everyone, you're listening to Verdon Interviews. This is your host Ken, and right now I got Dr. Helen Weng with me today. Dr. Weng, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Sure, thanks so much for having me.
Alrighty, so we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. So before we get into it, I'm just going to break down a little bit about what we might have an idea of what we're going to talk about today. So looking at our topics here, we're going to be talking about your studies that you've done with compassion and meditation, as well as basically the uses that you found from doing these studies. And so I think those are like the two main areas we're going to be talking about today, unless there's some other stuff you had in mind, or does that cover it most correctly?
Sure, yeah, I think that is enough to cover in and of itself, yeah.
Alrighty. So to get right into it, one of the first things I wanted to bring up that we talked about before is you mentioned to me with doing this type of research, because we'll go more into detail about what the kind of research is that you do. You mentioned the 4 immeasurables. Can you talk to me a little bit about what exactly that is?
Yeah, it's a term from the Vipassana tradition of meditation. So it's called the 4 immeasurables, and they are empathy, compassion, equanimity, and empathetic joy. And a lot of my research has focused on compassion, so that's one of the 4 immeasurables. And there are many definitions of compassion. One definition that we can start with is when you witness someone suffering, that you yourself feel something for them and want to care for them and to help them. So you're moved by their suffering and then have a desire to care for them and to help them. And I thought it was very interesting because they're called the 4 immeasurables. And here we are, scientists trying to measure these things. So I like to say that I'm trying to measure the immeasurable. So it's a very challenging and interesting line of work.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that to someone that might be unfamiliar with your type of work, that it almost came across to me as almost sounding corny at first, just because, as you said, it's something like compassion sounds immeasurable. So when you tell someone that, like, we're going to study this and measure this, it seems like something that's really kind of almost funky or impossible to just gather that type of data.
Yeah, it's been very challenging. So it's interesting because I think as people, we want to connect with each other, right? We need each other for our happiness, for our survival. And compassion is kind of a relational glue to help us relate to one another and care for each other. Yet it's treated as kind of hokey. Another term that is less scientific is love. But these things are real and we feel them day to day. And I think most of us want to feel a sense of compassion for ourselves and from other people and extend it to other people. So my work is really driven by the question, can we practice compassion? Can we train compassion like other skills? Like how we learn reading in school, math in school, we learn how to play instruments, we learn how to exercise. Is compassion also something we can learn, and how does that help ourselves and help the people around us?
Alrighty. Well, that sounds like a really dignified motivation that you have there, so I'm happy to hear that. I'd really like to start breaking this down about how, as you say, turn the measurable into the immeasurable. So let's start off with a bit about these studies that you do, and you can walk us through the process about how you begin to study these things, and the type of people you use to study these things, and things like that. Is there any point that you'd like to start off with, like how you do with the objective measurements or using the scientific method, for example?
Sure. I think the challenge in studying compassion and compassion meditation or other ways to try to cultivate compassion, the issue is always going to be measurement. So I'm going to talk about that. So compassion can be thought of as a certain kind of response towards someone who's suffering, that is caring for them and wanting to help for them. So how do you really capture that? So I worked at the Center for Healthy Minds in Madison, Wisconsin, and the director is Dr. Richie Davidson there. And he specializes in using brain imaging techniques to measure emotions. So one way to think of compassion is a certain kind of emotional feeling towards people. And people are kind of notoriously bad at identifying emotions, describing emotions, and emotions are experienced physically in our bodies, because when we react to something, it goes to our heart, it goes to our lungs, it goes to our stomach, and brain signals can help capture this kind of response. So it's what we call an objective measurement of something like an emotion, and it just means that it's not reliant on people reporting accurately what's going on for them. It's another source of information that is less susceptible to bias. Okay. So, yeah. And what you'll find with compassion work is that people will want to say, I feel very compassionate, they're practicing compassion, and they want to please the scientists, so they'll say they're very compassionate, so we need other sources of information as well.
Yeah, so it certainly sounds like what you're saying is that a lot of people think they have most people have a general grasp of what these concepts are, but what they're saying is not always what their experience is, at least from a measurable standpoint.
Right, and it's still always important what people's experiences are, how they understand them, and we also need other sources of information, particularly for things like funding, for grants. If we show that compassion meditation can help people's health and other people's well-being, people want to see numbers based on more objective measures in order to influence policies and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And so I think it definitely gives a much better understanding between the objective and the subjective, where subjective is with the emotions. And while, as you said, and I agree with this, that everyone's emotions or feelings that they have, they do exist, but different people feel them to different extents, so they might not always be truly reflective. Where doing a lot of these scans and things of that matter, you can get a much more concrete view of what's really going on inside their heads.
Yeah, it's right. It's less susceptible to what they want you to believe is going on. And then another part of measurement we really worked on is, if you practice compassion, does it actually impact other people as well? And so we developed measures to see if it changes the way you are generous with another person. And we developed an economic exchange paradigm that we adapted from the economics field. So basically, people had to spend their own money to help out someone else, and that money would get taken out of their paycheck for the study. So they really had to mean it, because it's not just, wishing wonderful things in our minds, which is good, but does it actually translate and impact to how we treat other people? And I'm very interested in how do we make our world better for more people, because there is a lot of suffering going on.
Yeah, most definitely. So you brought up some of the people that you have on too, and so I'll kind of throw this in there as well as how we're going about the process of how you study these things. But can you give me some idea of how you select some of the people or some of the other people you use? I know I eventually want to bring up your studies you did, like you said, at UW-Madison with the Dalai Lama and other monks, and just other general civilians as well.
Yeah, so our center at UW-Madison, the Center for Healthy Minds, started out the compassion meditation work really studying experts. Like, I don't believe His Holiness was put in the scanner, but other quite well-known, experienced monks with many hours of meditation practice. And we scan their brains to see what they look like when they hear sounds of people suffering. So they're hearing people suffering, they're generating a sense of compassion, wishing well-being for everyone, and what does that really look like? And so that was really interesting. They showed increases in areas like the insula, which is involved in emotion processing, in paying attention to our bodies. It's in conscious awareness. It's involved in lots of different mental states. And this was very inspiring. And I also wanted to ask for my projects, monks dedicate their whole lives to meditation. And for people like you and me who might have some time to practice, but maybe cannot devote our whole lives, what if we just tried it for 2 weeks? What would happen? So that was really my question. So we took people from the Madison community who had no meditation experience, and either we call it random assignment. So we kind of roll a dice, and they get into the compassion group or the control group, where they learn something called reappraisal, which is just thinking about things a little differently to feel less stressed out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to know, too, with these random samples, was there a lot of variance between some of these groups, or was there certain kind of factors? And especially in between, let's say, the monks that have been dedicated for many years doing this, and your ordinary Wisconsinite citizen, let's say.
Yeah, there would be a lot of demographic differences. So I haven't personally directly studied the monks versus the non-monks, but I know they're doing those kinds of studies now at the center. So that's one of the major scientific critiques of this kind of work is, who are we studying? Are they comparable groups? So the monks tend to be, we flew a bunch of them out from Asia. They might be from different countries. They have different cultures and lifestyles. For the people in the Madison community with this random assignment, we can generally assume that when you randomly assign someone, it kind of cancels out some of the demographic issues. So people were generally the same age, generally, equal genders. None of them had meditation experience. So when you study certain groups, you have to just make sure your comparison group is matched on some of these variables.
Yeah, definitely have a random sample like that. That'll definitely make for the best results. And yeah, because one of the things I'm really curious about, because I'm still learning a lot about this topic myself, and one of the things I would like to know is, we all understand what the concept of compassion is, but I don't think many people know how to really improve upon their compassion or practicing it. It's one of those things where many people understand what they have to do, but they don't know how to get that. That could be anger issues, emotional troubles, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. It's actually not that bad. So we have the compassion meditation guided MP3 online, which I think you'll share the link to that, right? So anyone can download this and practice at home and see how it works for you. And so we try to make it accessible and then work from there. So to make it more accessible, you first start with someone it's easy to feel compassion for. So in the meditation, you call to mind someone you really love and care for, like maybe a family member or a friend, and you think of a time that they've really suffered. And so anyone we're close to will be aware of times when they've gone through a breakup, or they didn't get the job they wanted, or they broke their leg or something. And so we can call to mind a time when they've suffered. And then we let our own feelings arise as we remember that. Because we have our own complex reactions to other people's suffering. We ourselves can feel kind of hurt because they're hurt. We can feel defensive. We can feel sad. And sometimes we kind of skip through those emotions too fast. Like they're so uncomfortable, we want to move to the next step, right? And so part of the meditation is learning to just be with those feelings because they can feel kind of hard, you know? Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of the meditation, learning a balanced and more non-judgmental kind of attention to those sensations and thoughts that arise.
Yeah.
And then
I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah, and then the next part is to act. So once you have to like accept whatever feelings you're having, right? And then you move to a different part where you actively cultivate a sense of caring and warmth towards the person. And we have people repeat phrases like, may you be free from suffering, may you be happy, may you have joy and ease. And there's also a part where you imagine a golden light going from your heart to the other person's heart, and it helps relieve their suffering. So it's kind of a visualization as well. If you're a more visual person, this really helps. And it kind of gives you a sense that no matter what's happening, you can always still care about people.
Yeah.
Even if it's hard, this is something you can always cultivate.
Yeah, most definitely. One of the things I find very fascinating about practicing this meditation is how, since I practice it, I can take a thought that would, let's say it's a negative feeling of sadness or anger that's brought on by a certain circumstance. And I can now turn that situation and learn to just experience it, where I'm still feeling the same amount of pain as any other individual, but I can learn to acknowledge it in a way that it might linger for, say, 5 minutes compared to me prior to this. It might have lingered for an hour. And I think that's one of the biggest beneficial things of these kind of practices.
Yeah, I think once people gain skills of how to work with their feelings, so sometimes people try to avoid their feelings, and then they come back, right?
Yeah.
They come back stronger, maybe in a different form. And so it's learning a new kind of attention to acknowledge your feelings and understand them better. And like you said, it can help them move through your system more quickly because you're acknowledging it. And I think they move even more quickly if you listen to what it's telling you and act on it accordingly. So if you're feeling really sad that something is up with your friend or something, your friend's not feeling well, maybe that feeling of sadness will move you to check in on them, give them a call, see how they're doing. From my experience as a psychologist and as a person learning these practices, if you can actually bring your actions in alignment with what your feelings are telling you, they will move through your system faster because they're actually just signals from our bodies about what we need to do.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I definitely try to understand more of these things still, and just how to, not just with myself, but identifying other people too, and going along with that as well too. And the thing I find fascinating about your studies is that it does help bring understanding to me of a topic where before it might have been expressed by the people that practice it in a very non-descriptive, non-tangible, almost like a spiritual kind of way of describing it, if that makes sense what I'm saying. In a way that some might say you need to have your heart one with your mind or something like that, where there's someone that's actually trying to participate in compassion, to them that might not mean that much, but when you conduct these studies, it helps bring a better understanding of what's really going on.
Right, making it more concrete. Because it's interesting. They sound like metaphors sometimes, but the heart is actively involved in the way we feel towards one another and relate to one another. And I'm not a heart expert, but there are other people who study variables from the heart. So there's actually studies of loving kindness meditation, which is like compassion meditation when you wish wellness and love towards people. And they show changes in heart variables, things called resting sinus arrhythmia, and show that it increases the positive emotions people feel, and it's related to the heart variables, and it relates to people feeling connected to one another. So it's not just a metaphor. That's what's like really interesting. And so the more we can measure things from the body and teach people, you just have to sit down, settle down, listen to what your body is telling you, because we're all like physical creatures,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that a lot of these words that we use nowadays for describing these concepts like compassion, do you think it's something that the way we might describe our feelings or dealing with emotions to shift over the years as new research is done? And what I mean is someone might describe, like I said, having my heart one with my mind or something like that. That sounds almost might sound like nonsense to someone else, but in maybe say 10, 20 years from now, after doing more research, we can have better ways of describing these feelings.
Yeah, I think better ways of describing, better ways of understanding, better ways of measuring. And each person has a different understanding of what a certain word means. So when I say heart, you might understand it differently than how I understand it.
Yeah.
But the more we can share stories, we can share information, we might start to have a better understanding and communication about it.
Yeah, because I definitely see a lot of the criticism towards things such as meditation or compassion as something that's objectionable or objective, is that it is something that we don't have words for. The words that are being used might come across as nonsense words, and you might have someone that can practice it very well saying the same thing as someone that says they practice it but don't follow through. You have a lot of people saying the same things because they're easy and accessible to say to any given citizen.
Right.
But it's hard to almost at this point, or at least before this point, to distinguish between who's being truthful or honest when they're describing their compassion.
Yeah, and that's why we try to measure things beyond what just people say, and especially the way they act. The way you act really shows more than what you say. And hopefully these things are in alignment, but we all know people where it's not in alignment. Yeah. You say one thing and then you act another way. Mm-hmm. And so getting back to the study, that's why we work so hard to develop an objective measure of helping behavior for other people. Maybe I'll talk a little briefly. So people practice this meditation for 30 minutes a day, and you start with someone you love, someone it's more easy to feel compassion for. Mm-hmm. And then you move on to other kinds of people like yourself. So some people can have really harsh judgments of themselves and need to work on that relationship.
Okay.
And then we also have people practice with strangers. So can you feel compassion for a stranger on the street? And so you don't know that person, but if you think about it, each person goes through heartache. Each person goes through difficult times. Every person has pain in some form or another. And so you can relate to them in that way, and also I wish you happiness and health and things like that, even though I don't know you. And then finally, you work towards feeling compassion towards difficult people. So people you might have trouble with, someone you're not agreeing with or having a conflict with. And it just shifts perspective. Like you think about, okay, when has this person suffered in their lives? Because we all have. Mm-hmm. How is this person maybe suffering right now? And that's kind of triggering some of their behavior. And it just shifts your perspective, and it kind of loosens all your ideas of what's going on, Because we can get like really trapped in these, these patterns of I don't like this person, I wish they would go away. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of work up, you start with someone easier and you work up to someone harder. And that's how we think it's developing kind of like exercising a muscle.
Okay.
And it's not easy. Like,
no.
Yeah.
It can certainly be analogous to working your mind through, like, maybe just more cognitive skills or just athletic skills, too. It's working on your compassion. It's really like doing a workout. And it's something that takes a lot of time. So I definitely like the usage of starting off with someone that you are really close to and can relate to, because it's definitely easier that way. And as you build up. One thing I'd like to know, too, because one thing I haven't heard many people talk about is maybe how people can misunderstand getting into something like meditation. And is it possible that some people could do it wrong or could even harm themselves if they don't understand it? Like, to give some examples here is maybe someone that's in a really depressive, like extremely low point in their life or suffering, in such an excruciating way, that they almost might get into meditation prematurely, where they might have a better effect if they got into it after a really low point in their life. Is that something that would be a concern to some people?
Yeah, there are people actively studying these kinds of issues, like that meditation may not be for everyone or everyone at all time points, right? And what are some of the negative things that can happen? And so I would say, like, because meditation is so internal, and sometimes we can get lost in certain spaces and not recognize it, that I think it's always good to try to be honest with yourself. How is this going? Am I am I gaining something from this? Because sometimes insight, like learning your own mind, can be difficult, right? There are difficult things that come up, and I think people don't talk about that enough, so I'm going to talk about it. That once you become more aware of what's going on inside, I almost feel like it's inviting the difficult stuff to come up, and that's actually a positive thing.
Okay.
Things you're not acknowledging start to come up, and you're learning new skills to deal with it. But everyone has their own pace, everyone has their own history, and so I would say, check in with people, tell people what you're up to, like talk to your friends. Someone might need to actually work with a therapist, because doing meditation by yourself, even with a teacher, is not the same as seeing a psychotherapist who's trained to work through some of the really difficult mind states. And this is not to discount the skills that meditation teachers have, but if they don't have clinical training to work with some of the very difficult mental states or recognize when people's mental health is starting to decline. So I think just checking in with yourself, checking in with other people. The thing with depression, so with depression and anxiety, what happens a lot is something called rumination, where you get stuck in a thought loop, right? You get stuck in this cycle of negative thoughts and negative feelings. And so people think that meditation is not great when you're actively very depressed, because when you look inside, you see the negative things and you just repeat them. And so what psychologists are doing is using meditation more of a treatment for people who are already mostly recovered from depression.
Okay.
And using other techniques for that, and then using the meditation to help them become aware of what their minds are doing and to help prevent them from getting depressed again.
Alrighty. Yeah, that brings more clarity to that too. And I do apologize for bringing up meditation on such a seemingly depressing side of it, because I do want in a minute here get more into the positive sides of meditation and how it can be really useful. But it is definitely something that was, I heard a few other people propose, so I was just really curious to ask that. And so you definitely answered that too. So with depression, how it can be used for people starting off with it, I'm sure that they can find instructions online about how to meditate, but how would you recommend for maybe like time consistency and just how people start getting into meditation and start having a better understanding of knowing that they're meditating in a proper manner?
Yeah, so let's see. I would recommend taking a class first. So there's more and more meditation centers popping up. There's a lot of yoga centers that also teach meditation. Now there's meditation apps. So I would try to take a class with someone you could ask questions for. There are lots of questions that pop up. There's lots of assumptions about what meditation is and isn't. There are books you can read. I can recommend those, send you some titles.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's really, following the instructions that your teacher gives you and seeing what happens and then asking questions, whatever comes up for you. People mistakenly think that so oftentimes when you first start meditating, they teach concentration meditation, like focus on your breath. If your mind wanders, return your attention to the breath. And so that's a common when people learn initially. And then people will say, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's really, really normal for your mind to wander, and for your mind to do other things. And it's actually good, because when it goes somewhere else, it helps us realize what our minds like to do, and it brings awareness to what our minds are doing, and then helps us regain attention and bringing it back. And so there's no doing it right. If you notice that your mind is wandering a lot, then you are doing it right, because you're noticing what's happening with your mind. And so if we can let go of what meditation is supposed to be like, what I'm supposed to feel, you're opening yourself up to your whole system, and so you can feel the whole range of emotions. There's also this assumption that I should feel calm and happy after every meditation session. That is just false. I'm just going to say that is false. Because you're just bringing your attention to what's going on for you. And if you're going through a rough time, you're not going to feel great. But it's teaching you to be more balanced with whatever's happening. And if you're more balanced, you can make better decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it too, because so many people think that meditation is, well, I do almost see it as a superpower in a way. It is, I think people look at, like, the results that they're expecting are much different than what meditation can offer. And it does offer positive, but I think a lot of people are kind of confused, especially people that might get into it, where they're convinced that they're not doing it right, or that they just cannot achieve working meditation.
Yeah, okay, and so I want to break it down kind of simply. Can I try to do that? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So meditation, some aspects of it is you're training a certain quality of attention, which is kind of focused, right? You can stabilize it, keep it on whatever your goal is, and that it's open and it's non-judgmental and it's kind. So it's all these aspects of attention. And so I encourage people to find what naturally draws your attention to that kind of state. Like, I love music. So I listen to music in a meditative way all the time because that's what I love anyway. And so I think people get caught up in, oh, I have to focus on my breath, or oh, I have to focus on my heart or something. It's whatever draws your attention naturally to that interested, stable, you really like something. And that's a good place to start, because all it is it's slowing down your attention. We're usually going a mile a minute, right? You just have to slow it down, and you have to bring kindness to it. And that's my simplest way of describing meditation. You're slowing things down and you're bringing kindness. And so you can choose whatever you want to bring that kind of attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely understand too with that too, and how it's even helped me in my life with that. And I would say your description there is spot on. Because even stuff, my own life samples, before I was calling you here for this interview, my laptop that I'm on right now, it's the Skype recording device I had on here just was not working, and I was starting to have almost like a mini panic attack. And so I found a way to fix it, but up until then, right before the interview, I was able to just really calm myself and get myself in a better state of mind with 10 minutes to spare before our phone call, so I wasn't jittery or kind of anxious right when we started talking. So, and I know pieces like that in my life will happen from here on here out, so I can only imagine the type of effects it must have on people that have been doing this for a significantly longer portion of time than I've been doing it, which has been probably like 4 months now for me. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting watching that too. And it does have other benefits too. I know you mentioned to me before that one of the other great benefits of this compassion and kindness is financial generosity. Would you like to talk more about that?
Sure. I'll briefly go through the study results. So we found the compassion group who practiced 30 minutes a day for 2 weeks, and that MP3 is online. They were more generous in this task after 2 weeks compared to the control group, who learned how to reinterpret events in their lives to feel less stressed out. So it was more focused on how do I feel better. The compassion and meditation was more focused on how do I care about other people. And so they were more generous. And then we found that the more their brain changed, the more generous they were. So in the brain scanner, we measured them before and after the 2 weeks. We showed them pictures of people suffering, like people with injuries, people who are crying. We asked them to evoke compassion to those pictures. And then the control group just reinterpreted the pictures to feel less stressed about them. And the compassion group, the more they activated a region in the parietal cortex, which is more towards the back of the head, it's involved in empathy processing. So the more they activated that region, the more generous they were in this completely different task outside of the scanner. So it's like the way your mind perceives suffering in response to it then will translate to how you actually treat other people in a different situation.
Yeah, it sounds like they're definitely able to focus their mind more where, say, someone that is lacking compassion, anger, or other emotions might distract them from those feelings, but when you're able to control those feelings a lot more, you can be much more aware of your sense of compassion that you have towards these other situations, whether it's just like pictures, like you said, or just putting that in action by being more generous to people.
Yeah, it's so when you're like learning a new kind of emotional response, like you said, there's a part of, we found like parts of the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in planning and kind of thinking and learning new things, that it was kind of helping to dampen some negative reactive responses. So like if things come up like, oh my God, I want to get out of here right now, I don't like seeing this, which I think a lot of us feel like it's hard to see someone suffer. Yeah. It helps to manage those kinds of emotions and also helps to manage amping up the parts of you that care about the person. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'll focus less on how I'm feeling comfortable. Let me focus more on how the other person's doing.
Okay.
How can I connect to what's going on for them, and maybe I can ask them how they're doing or try to do something to help them.
Okay. Do you think some people tend to be confused by observing outward appearances of compassion, such as, say, someone that might gloat a lot about how great they are or how compassionate they are, or always be virtuous amongst themselves or amongst others, compared to someone that, say, will always do the right thing but has almost like a stern attitude? Do you think that can be easily confused but more obvious once you conduct these studies?
Yeah, I think people are very different in their cultural norms and their history. So some people, like for some people it might be embarrassing to help someone. Like you wouldn't want to offer someone help because that threatens how they're perceived or something. They have to seem like they got it all together. So it's people are different and their behaviors are different, can reflect different things. With compassion, I think the way, first you have to understand the culture of the person and what certain things mean to them. I think observing people multiple times in different situations is really the real test. Like someone might act really great in front of their boss and then be a jerk to their employee, right? I think we've all seen this. And so I think studying people in multiple situations kind of reveals people's true colors. Yeah. Also studying how other people feel around them. So who do people gravitate towards, right? Do you gravitate towards the person you're comfortable with, the person who's nice to you? Do you gravitate towards people that make you uncomfortable? And so there are studies where you actually examine the physiology or the brains of the other person, not the compassionate person, but the people around them, because to me the true test of compassion is how you impact the people around you.
Yeah, that's a very good way of pointing that out. I hadn't even thought about that before, honestly. Mm-hmm. And yeah, especially with the different cultural attitudes, or even on an individualistic level, how some people's values are simply different than other people's. Yeah. Some people might be more offended by what they perceive to be a negative action, and some people might take more compassion back from another action by someone else. That maybe to person A, it might be like an extraordinarily generous act. To person B, that might be something that's even just expected, or something like that. So sometimes it can definitely be easy to misinterpret someone's intentions that way, that even if they intend the best things, it might not be as obvious to the observers.
Right, and if you're truly compassionate towards other people, you would want to know how they're responding. You would want to know how they're doing, and you might intend to be helpful, but it may not land in the right way. And so really showing compassion is checking in with the person, seeing how they're doing, seeing if you're actually helping them, or ask them what they need.
Yeah.
Right? We're not total mind readers.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely noticed that with a lot of people I've met too. Like one of the biggest problems I've noticed in my life is other people that will do everything right or be nice enough, but they could be doing so much more. And I never had like a legitimate criticism for them. But I think that what you're describing with the compassion here could fill that void where people could, like you said, check in more with those
Yeah.
around them.
Right.
So even if someone's for all intents and purposes, being compassionate to other people just because of individual cultural or individual values, they might not be doing it in a way that it could be more. They could be doing so much more.
Yeah, not even more, but different.
Okay.
Something like as so I'm also trained as a therapist, and what I found is that people are really different, right? My patients are different. They have different needs, and so I would feel myself shift depending on what I gathered that they needed, and we would talk about things. And so it was a little dysregulating for me because I'd have to be a different person with different clients depending on their needs. But to me, that was my expression of truer compassion, is adjusting to what they need for their health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so it doesn't have to be that extreme for each person, but it's not true compassion unless you're talking with people and like checking in with them and seeing how they're feeling. Yeah. You might be doing the best you can and thinking this is what they need, but if they don't agree or it's not working right, you need to be able to communicate about that. So really, it's about constant communication and demonstration of caring through checking in.
Yeah, I definitely imagine that willingness to input that energy that's involved with doing that communication, because it's not easy, especially with people that are hard to work with, or people that will not give you solid answers or very wishy-washy answers.
Yeah, and not everyone knows. That's the thing. Like, we're not always taught how to identify our needs, identify our feelings, and to say it out loud. Like, I think women are socialized to not voice their needs all the time. We're more socialized to take care of other people. So compassion can be really complicated. Like I'm at the point where I'm learning to because it's about relationships. Relationships need balance, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're giving too much, that's actually not compassionate for yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's like a constant monitoring of the relationships and the balance and seeing who, how do I take care of myself and the relationship?
Yeah, because I always notice that reflecting on my own life right now, where everyone I met that seemed to be the heart that I would have the most disdain for, almost the most hatred for, it wouldn't always be the people that were the meanest. Like some of them might even be a bully. It is always people that I would find a lot of roadblocks in with our communication.
Okay.
Or, like someone that might say something outwardly rude to me, but tells me why they might say that to me. I won't be as offended as someone that does something seemingly rude to me, but just will not explain it, even if it's not nearly as bad as what the prior person did. So it's situations where we cannot come to a consensus about how to react to each other's emotions or how to attempt to build our relationship better. Yeah. So I think that those building blocks of learning how to do better, like having better communication with others that you might be finding conflicts with, or even just a lack of a positive feeling with, is the first steps to really.
Yeah, and it's hard.
It's hard.
Like, and there aren't super good models for it. Like, if you meet someone that you can watch who does it well, I would spend more time with that person. Yeah, it took a while to, like, we're people. We're like, monkey see, monkey do. And so I think that's why it's important to have good models and people who can walk the talk or whatever, and see how they navigate conflict and see how they speak to people and communicate with people. And if you spend more time around them, it starts to sink in, because it's easier to watch and to learn than to like think about it and try to act that way.
Yeah.
It's easier to absorb from other people. Yeah.
Would you say that then people, I mean, this is kind of a self-given answer, but the people that are more compassionate are able to accurately predict someone's intentions with an action, especially someone that might be more malicious, like a manipulator? Or is that something that's still difficult regardless of how compassionate you are?
Can you say that again?
Okay, so let me try to explain better what I mean. It is someone that's more compassionate would likely have a better understanding of other people's emotions, being more aware of what's going on. So do you think someone like that let's say they're encountering someone that's a bit more out of the norm, whether it could be much more smiley or compassionate than most people they meet, or someone could be on the opposite spectrum, be like a manipulator or someone that's malicious with their intentions. Do you think that someone that practices this meditation and being self-aware of others around them, that they can be more observant of these subtle emotions or behavior changes better? Like, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's all how you use your meditation practice. And so some people are very socially aware and motivated and want to understand these more subtle distinctions better. Other people just want to be more focused at work or to feel less stress. And so it depends on where you bring your attention again, right?
Okay.
And I think because these practices can help sharpen your perception, so you might notice things you didn't notice before. Mm-hmm. And if you spend time trying to understand what you're seeing, observing people's behavior, again, like observing people's behavior in different situations start to reveal their true intentions or true motivations. It can help make you more perceptive as long as you're paying attention and getting honest feedback. Okay. If that makes any sense. Like, some people can really try at this, but they're not understanding things properly, and so they're not going to learn right.
Okay. So I didn't know if that was almost like I understand what you're saying.
That's not based on science at all, what I just said. That was just...
I'll definitely keep that in mind and have our audience members keep that in mind, so I won't hold you on that.
Yeah, I'm talking much more from psychologist perspective and a practitioner's perspective at this point.
Yeah. And and I do know we are getting pretty closer to our ending point. I feel like this conversation has gone by really quickly, so I think that's a good sign of a really fun conversation we've had. But some of the last things I'd like to touch on more about is I don't want you to talk about anything that you're not ready to talk about yet. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what are some of your future outlooks or things that you're hoping to uncover about or just learn more about in this field? Because you you moved from working at UW-Mass into San Francisco now, and a little bit more about how you're hoping to progress your studies.
Sure. I'd say there's two general arms to my new work. So in the compassion study, the way we analyze brain data typically is to average everyone's brain structure and function together to fit a standard brain. And I just noticed, like, in the compassion data set with people practicing for 2 weeks, everyone was doing something a little different in their brains. And so when you average that together and everyone's doing something slightly different, it turns out to look like nothing. But I know nothing. I know there's something happening because it's just a different kind of mental state. And so that really made me investigate new methods. And so now I'm working on brain methods that allow each person's mind and brain to work how it works and not to make it average to someone else. And this approach is working a lot better in my experience to understanding the mental states happening for people. So I'm using a technique called machine learning, which is like pattern recognition applied to brain data to recognize mental states during meditation. So I'm basically working on trying to read mental states during meditation, which right now it's very difficult to know what actually people are focusing on once they close their eyes. So that's a big challenge. It's going pretty well. I have some grants to work on that, and I hope within a year some of that work will come out. The other arm is that part of what makes people's brains and minds function differently is based on their culture and their identities and their history. And so I'm a multicultural person. My parents are from Taiwan. I've spent my whole life navigating multiple cultures, different ideas of how things should be, different value sets. It was really confusing, and that's how I used a lot of my meditation practices to understand all these different thoughts and feelings that would get triggered like that. Like all of a sudden I'd be shot into Asian girl mode and I wouldn't know what's happening. Like, because Asian girl mode is like, don't talk, just listen to everyone else. And I couldn't do that for the rest of my life. So, and then as a psychologist, I worked with a lot of people who are LGBTQ and so I have a lot of cultural flexibility, which is stressful and also a big strength. Like, it means because I know that multiple worlds exist and I am a minority in this country, so I'm used to adapting to other people very quickly. So I think that my experience doing that made it very easy for me to like understand other people's worlds, and that's part of compassion too, is understanding different people's perspectives. And so the more I understood other people's worlds, I could flexibly make my psychotherapy work for them better and faster. And just the growth I saw was beautiful. Like the growth in people that experience a lot of discrimination and oppression, but then using meditation or other psychotherapy, or just learning about themselves, feeling a sense of pride and growth, and watching them blossom was very inspiring. And so now I'm trying to get much more diverse populations into the studies, and so I'm making my studies more culturally sensitive to racial and ethnic minorities, to LGBTQ people, to people with disabilities, and trying to make everyone feel involved and trying to hopefully get more attention to their stories and their journeys, because they're just as valuable and beautiful as the kind of standard stories we hear about people. So.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's something that I observe a lot, and anyone can turn on the news channel and know exactly what the struggles you're talking about. So, that's a really awesome, basically almost like a side effect that you had, being so multicultural, going into this profession of yours and doing what you do. It can really help solve these problems a lot quicker and with much more accuracy. But I definitely agree that I would like to see more people that come from different backgrounds culturally or different values and learn to discuss these things more and have more compassion for one another, because so many issues nowadays, and you can rattle off countless political issues going on right now, that just because one side will paint the other side in such a black and white manner, they'll get some of the main problems that are going on, but the solutions are very ineffective, or at least will be very negative towards one side compared to the other. So I think having that compassion was a way of saying that while some of these propositions or political debates people do have good points, it could be much more, it could be sculpted to be so much more in detail once you understand who it is you're seemingly at conflict with.
Yeah, I think a lot of these discussions would benefit with people bringing a sense of compassion and wanting to understand each other and wanting to work towards solutions that work for more people. It's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, it seems we're coming up to our mark here, so I definitely want to thank you so much again for coming on to the show. This has been exciting. And is there any other books, any other blogs of yours or blogs of colleagues of yours that you'd like to direct my fans to before we get going?
I think it's hard for me to list things off the top of my head, so I can send you links and things. You can search Helen Weng, UCSF, and my webpage is there. And I work at the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine at UCSF and the Neuroscape Center, so I can include those links. And then my grad center was Center for Healthy Minds. And
if you definitely want to, after this conversation, just send me those links. I'll be happy to post them on my Facebook page and tag you in that, so anyone might be directed towards that and learning more. But yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot, we had a lot to talk about today. Unfortunately, there's a lot even on our list here that we didn't get a chance to get to. But I definitely recommend people that are just being introduced to you now to go and check out your other work on YouTube and other blogs or articles that you've written to learn more about this stuff, because it's such an in-depth topic, and it's something that I think right now is a very young topic, if I'm representing it correctly, that there's still so much to learn from it.
Yeah, there's a lot to do.
Very few people right now that can describe the kind of studies you're doing with the accuracy that you would have.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, well, thank you very much again, Helen, for coming out to the show.
You're welcome.
This concludes this episode of Verdant Interviews. If you'd like to hear more interesting conversations with new guests, you can find these discussions on my YouTube channel, Verdant Interviews, on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Verdant Interviews, or on my Weebly blog at verdantinterviews.weebly.com. You can also follow me on Facebook under the tag @Verdant Interviews for other updates and information.